There's no denying that we are seeing an unsettling turn on the left, from a more open and tolerant movement into a much more ideological one that advocates rather stupid ideas like safe spaces and deplatforming college speakers. Stuff that is entirely antithetical to the principles of free speech that the left used to champion. But as discouraging as that is, what strikes me as even more incredibly hypocritical is the smug, self-righteous, holier-than-thou stance that the right has taken in response to these things. When the fact is, these censorship tactics, of which political correctness is only one, did not originate on college campuses or even from millennials. I could give you a laundry list of examples of conservatives having their own social taboos, getting offended, and even outright violating freedom of speech. I mean, we can even go rather recent. Does anyone remember the country music band the Dixie Chicks? Probably not, because they were essentially ostracized from country music and their careers destroyed after daring to criticize President Bush and the invasion of Iraq. Not only did conservatives boycott their music, but there were also public CD burnings, like a modern-day book burning, something that is also, by the way, almost exclusively a conservative phenomenon. So I guess it's not that surprising. But let's continue down the list, shall we? Back when Bush was president, Fox News was of the firm belief that any criticism of the president or his policies during wartime was akin to treason and supporting the enemy, essentially using the poor troops as a shield to shut down criticism, even for stuff that had nothing to do with the war. And how can we forget the war on Christmas, where religious conservatives got so offended over Starbucks cups and businesses trying to be more inclusive by saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas? And even more recently, how about when Tomi Lahren got suspended from The Blaze for revealing that she was pro-choice? And this is a publication that has repeatedly called out and criticized liberals for being anti-free speech and not being able to handle different opinions. I don't know how you can complain about liberal bias in colleges while just a couple years earlier wanting to teach quote-unquote both sides of the creationism and evolution debate in science classrooms. You know, at least college kids are somewhat able to think for themselves. Trying to indoctrinate kids into a religion in public schools is reprehensible. And this was mainstream conservative thought just a few years ago. I mean, come on. You can't complain about lack of intellectual diversity in colleges while finding your own safe spaces for years in unashamedly biased news sources like Fox News and Breitbart. Or get offended when somebody flies the Mexican flag, but claim it's okay to fly the Confederate flag because it's quote-unquote part of your heritage. This may be a more mundane example, but the only reason we're not allowed to say fuck on TV is because of conservative parents that got offended by it, or think that it will corrupt the minds of the youth. These are the same people who will criticize Muslims for wearing the burqa, but turn around and tell their daughters to cover up because they're dressing too slutty. I wasn't allowed to wear skulls as a kid because my parents thought it was indecent, which is basically the conservative code word for being offensive. Way back in the day, just having long hair was considered a rebellion by the youth because it went against the conservative values at the time. And we can go back even farther than that because historically, conservatives have almost exclusively been the ones to actually violate freedom of speech. Not just talk about it or say that we should stop using offensive words like liberals do today, but actually censor people. Protest suppression, like what happened in Miami in 2003 or the G20s in Pittsburgh and Toronto, are clear examples of government overreach that conservatives have always applauded. You can find comments like this on probably the majority of protest videos on YouTube. McCarthyism and blacklists were also prevalent back in the day, essentially government-sponsored harassment of people who express beliefs that were deemed socialist or communist, in the same way that SJWs will get together and dox someone or try to get them fired from their job today. In fact, conservatives still use the socialist communist buzzwords constantly as a censorship tactic, in the same way that SJWs have overused racist or sexist to the point that these words are essentially meaningless. They're just used as an emotional buzzword. And while we're on the subject, if you want to talk about underhanded tactics used to censor people, there's nothing better than the "those soldiers died for you, you're disrespecting the troops when you exercise your constitutional right to protest" straw man. We saw this back when everyone got triggered by Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, conflating his protest to hating America or hating the troops, as if everyone proclaiming loyalty to the state isn't creepy enough.
And it's really not creepy to have little kids mindlessly recite this anthem every day and pledge their life to a government before they're old enough to really think about what they're saying.
And they do the same thing with flag burning as well, with some people on the right calling to make it illegal again, even though the Supreme Court has already decided that it is protected by the right to protest and freedom of speech. This is no different than liberals trying to outlaw hate speech when they conflate making a rape joke to actually wanting to rape someone, or making a racist joke and actually being racist. You can burn the flag and protest the government without hating America as a country or disrespecting the troops that defend it. These things are not inherently linked, it's a straw man. And it's the same reason why we can't make cuts to our ridiculous military budget, because anyone who suggests it is called weak on terrorism or anti-American for not supporting the troops. This is political correctness. And look, I could go on and on and on. Complaining about liberals not being able to admit blacks commit more crime while they aren't even able to admit that evolution is real or that global warming is happening? Complaining that any gay representation in media is equivalent to shoving it down their throats and being too much of a snowflake to bake a cake because you don't like what someone else is doing in their own bedroom. Police, who got so triggered by Mayor Bill de Blasio that they turned their backs on him at a cop's funeral, saying that he was responsible because he dared to even suggest that there were problems in American policing. Snowden being condemned as a traitor by the right simply for revealing government overreach that was clearly unconstitutional. This idea that conservatism is and always has been a bastion of free speech and tolerance is absolutely insane. I'm not defending what some liberals are doing today, but the lack of self-awareness on the right is even more hypocritical. This is the left pulling away from liberal values. It is not caused by liberal values, and that's an important distinction. You cannot rewrite history to make this a liberal phenomenon, and you don't get to sweep under the rug the reality of how you acted when you were in power, just 8 short years ago. So with Trump in office, if the history of the right is anything to go by, this fake concern for freedom of speech is going to evaporate really quickly. I just hope that the people who truly care about freedom of speech band together before then. This is Death to Stupid, signing off.